discipline yourself. You think, okay, how much work can I do? If I load myself right to the maximum, how far can I work? How hard can I work until I exhaust myself? And then you back off, obviously, because the optimal amount of working, productive engagement, let's say, is that which is sustainable across decades. So you have to learn that, but you don't learn that without stretching yourself to your limits to begin with. And if your life isn't everything it could be, and if you're suffering from an excess of meaninglessness, well, it means you're not oriented in the world of chaos and order properly. It's like you could learn to discipline yourself. Figure out what it is that you need to do and that you want to do, and then see how efficient you can get. Because one of the things that's quite fun is to figure out, if you have a task, I always tell my graduate students this, if they're doing an experiment too, if you have a task that you have to do, it's really interesting to spend a few minutes, sometimes hours, depending on how long the task is, see if you can figure out how to do it from 5 to 10 times faster. It means you'll have to rearrange the way you think about it, but you can often do it. And that's how extremely productive people get so hyper efficient. Sometimes it means you have to delegate. Sometimes it means you have to bring other people aboard. That's delegation as well, I suppose. But there's a lot of preconceptions that you hold about who you are and who the world is that you could dispense with that would make you a way more efficient actor in the world. Ask yourself what would motivate you. First of all, don't be studying 8 hours a day, because that isn't going to work and you're not going to do it anyways. Would you start studying 5 minutes a day? Seriously, could you bring it up to 10 minutes a day? What would you have to do for yourself to get yourself to sit down for half an hour a day and study intently? Like maybe you'd have to, I don't know what you'd have to do, like have a beer at 6 o'clock at night or something, or maybe you'd have to go for a walk in the park or go out for coffee. It's like, imagine that you're sitting down with a stupid, undisciplined child and you're trying to get that child to do something useful. You say, okay, look, I want you to do X, it's necessary, but you can pick how much of it you're going to do, and I'll give you what you want if you do it. Well, ask yourself that and see what happens. So don't try to tyrannize yourself, try to negotiate with yourself and use some reward and see how that works. And start slow, maybe you're not very disciplined and the best you can do is half an hour of studying it a day. Well, start with half an hour. Increase that 5 minutes a week. If you do that, that's a lot. If you do that for a year, then by the end of the year you'll be studying 4 hours a day. So you can that's just with 5 minutes a week, right? Because that's 250 minutes in a year. So start ridiculously, pathetically. Study for 5 minutes a day for a week, and then move it to 10. You'll be able to do that. And don't cheat, because one of the things people do is they make a deal with themselves like that. I'm going to study for 10 minutes a day, each day. And then they get into it and they think, wow, this is going really good. So they study for 2 hours, and then they've broken the contract with themselves and they don't trust themselves anymore. And then they don't study for a whole year, or maybe for a month. So, but set your contract. Ask yourself, what could I do to move myself forward to my goal that I would do, and then how could I improve that incrementally? You can't exist outside of a framework of value. It's not possible. It's not technically possible. I outline this in quite a bit of detail in chapter 10, which is called Rule 10, which is called Be Precise in Your Speech, is that the way the world manifests itself to you is integrally tied to your value structure. And that's because, to put it very simply, is that your very vision is dependent on an aim. Like whenever you look at the world, you're aiming at something. You're aiming at something with your eyes. You can't focus on something without aiming at it, and you won't aim at it without valuing it. So your very perceptions are dependent on your value structure. Now that doesn't mean there isn't a world. It does mean that experience is a complex interplay of your value structure and the unmanifest world. It's something like that. And then that begs the question, which is, well, if you have to have a value structure, then what should it be? Well, and then that brings us back to the ideas that we were talking about earlier. Like you should value being. You should take on the responsibility of being as your highest ethical obligation and try to improve it, try to reduce suffering, try to make the most out of yourself in a way that's beneficial to you and your family and your community. You should aim high, and your perceptions will reconfigure themselves around those aims, and that will allow the world to manifest itself to you in the most positive possible manner, or at least in the most meaningful possible manner. Without a point, without value, without an aim, all you're left with is the misery and anxiety of life. That makes people bitter.